The vampire king heard his maid teaching his daughter forbidden words in the garden. Words from a language dead for 8 centuries. What he didn't know, his maid carried the blood of the most powerful vampires his ancestors had tried to erase, and she was about to awaken. King Octavian had ruled the vampire realm for 3 centuries, yet nothing in those long years had prepared him for what he heard that twilight evening. The royal garden glowed amber under the dying sun, a rare sight vampires could only enjoy in small doses. He'd stepped out to find his daughter before the full dark came, expecting to hear her usual laughter echoing between the rose hedges. Instead, he heard something impossible.
Ves hakara nimtolvenit samora.
The words drifted through the air like smoke from a dying fire.
Soft.
Rhythmic. Ancient. Octavian's blood went cold, or colder than it already was. He knew that cadence, that pitch, the way each syllable rolled and clicked in a pattern lost to time. The ancient tongue. His feet moved before his mind caught up, carrying him silently toward the eastern fountain. There, beneath a willow tree heavy with silver leaves, sat his 7-year-old daughter Celine, cross-legged on the grass, eyes closed, lips moving carefully around sounds that should not exist in her mouth. Across from her sat Mira. The maid was perhaps 25 in human years, young, even by mortal standards. She'd served the castle for 2 years, recommended by the head servant for her gentleness with children. Brown hair pulled back simply, plain gray dress, unremarkable in every way, except for what was coming out of her mouth. Veshkara nim, Mira repeated, her voice gentle but certain. Now you try the next part, little one. Tolveneth. Tolveneth. Celine giggled, delighted with herself. It sounds like singing. Octavian stepped from behind the willow. Both females looked up. Celine's face brightened instantly.
Papa.
Myra's teaching me the prettiest words. Listen, Veshkara nim, doesn't it sound like magic? But Octavian wasn't looking at his daughter. His eyes, crimson and ancient, locked onto Myra's face. She'd gone pale. Not the healthy flesh-cheeked pale she usually wore, but a bloodless white that made her look half dead. She knew she'd been caught doing something wrong.
She just didn't know what.
Celine, Octavian said quietly, his voice controlled in that way that made centuries-old warriors nervous. Go inside.
Now.
But Papa, we were just.
Now.
The princess knew that tone. She scrambled to her feet, shot Mira an apologetic look, and hurried toward the castle entrance. Her little footsteps faded into silence, leaving Octavian and Mira alone in the garden. The maid rose slowly, brushing grass from her dress with trembling hands. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Your Majesty, I apologize if I've overstepped. Where did you learn those words? His voice cut through the evening air like a blade. Mira blinked, opened her mouth, closed it again. I don't understand the question, sire. Don't play games with me. Octavian moved closer, and despite his efforts to remain calm, he could feel his fangs extending slightly. That language has been dead for over 800 years. The last vampire who spoke it was executed by my great-grandfather for treason. So, I will ask you once more. Where did you learn it? The genuine confusion on Myra's face almost looked real. Your Majesty, I've always known them. Since I was a child. My mother used to sing them to me before bed. I thought they were just pretty sounds. Lullabies. Lullabies, Octavian's laugh was bitter. You're teaching my daughter the tongue of the firstborn vampires, the most dangerous clan to ever exist, and you call them lullabies. Myra's eyes went wide. Firstborn?
But.
No, that's impossible. I'm human. My mother was human. We're from a farming village 3 provinces away. I don't know anything about. Then explain how you speak their language perfectly. Octavian was close now, close enough to hear her heartbeat hammering like a trapped bird. Every syllable, every inflection. You didn't stumble once. Most scholars spend decades trying to reconstruct even a few phrases from fragments, and they sound nothing like what you just spoke. Myra's face crumpled. She looked terrified and lost in equal measure. I don't know, Your Majesty. I've had these words in my head my whole life. Sometimes I dream in them, but I never knew they meant anything. I swear to you, I thought they were just sounds my mother made up. Octavian studied her face for a long moment. Either she was the most skilled liar he'd encountered in 3 centuries, or she was telling the truth. Neither option was comforting. Your mother, he said slowly. Where is she now? Dead, sire. 6 years passed. Fever took her in the winter. And your father? Never knew him. Mother said he left before I was born.
Of course he did.
Octavian turned away, his mind racing through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. The firstborn hadn't just been powerful, they'd been dangerous. Their bloodline carried abilities that made normal vampires look like children playing with wooden swords. Telepathy, memory walking. Some said they could compel other vampires with just their voice. That's why his ancestors had hunted them to extinction. Or so everyone believed. Mira, he said quietly, still facing away. I need you to understand something. What you possess, whatever this knowledge is, it makes you either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous. Possibly both. I don't possess anything, Your Majesty, her voice shook. I'm just a maid. I clean floors and mind children, and that's all I know how to do. He turned back to her. Tomorrow morning, I want you in the throne room at dawn.
Tell no one why.
Pack nothing. Just come. Am I being dismissed? Tears glistened in her eyes. Please, sire, this position is all I have. If I've done wrong, I can... You're not being dismissed. Octavian's expression softened fractionally. But I need answers, and there's only one place I can find them. Until then, you speak to no one about this. Not the other servants. Not my daughter. No one. Do you understand? Mira nodded quickly, relief and fear mixing on her face. Good. Go. She fled like a deer from a wolf. Octavian stood alone in the garden as true night fell around him. The ancient tongue, after all these centuries, spoken fluently by a human maid who claimed to know it from childhood lullabies. He looked up at the darkening sky, where the first stars were beginning to show. Somewhere in the castle's forbidden archives lay the truth. Ancient manuscripts, sealed histories, records of the firstborn clan and their extinction. And tomorrow, he would tear through every dusty page until he found an explanation. Because if Mira was what he suspected, if she carried even a drop of that blood, then everything was about to change. For better or for worse. Octavian didn't wait until dawn. The moment full darkness settled over the castle, he descended into the depths most of his own court had forgotten existed. The forbidden archives lay 7 levels beneath the throne room, behind 3 sealed doors that required blood locks, his blood specifically. The air grew colder with each step downward, until even his supernatural body felt the chill. The final door groaned open, releasing a breath of dust that hadn't been disturbed in decades. Octavian summoned a flame to his palm, red and flickering, and stepped inside. The chamber stretched impossibly far, lined with shelves that climbed toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Thousands of manuscripts. Scrolls bound in leather that had long since cracked. Books whose pages had fused together from centuries of moisture and neglect. This was where his family buried their secrets. He moved through the aisles with purpose, searching for the section marked with the crimson seal, the firstborn records. His fingers trailed along spines until he found it, a collection of texts bound in black metal, etched with warnings in 6 dead languages. Herein lies the history of the resonance. Read at your own peril. Octavian pulled the first volume free and began reading by firelight. The firstborn, he learned, weren't actually a separate species of vampire. They were the original vampire bloodline, the first strain created by ancient magic now lost to time. But within that bloodline existed something rarer still. The resonance. His eyes moved faster across the page as understanding dawned. The resonant bloodline possessed a unique gift: ancestral memory retention. Each generation carried not just their own experiences, but echoes of every ancestor who came before. Their minds became living libraries of the past. Octavian's hand tightened on the book's edge. This gift manifested most strongly in speech. A resonant could speak languages they'd never learned, recall events they'd never witnessed, recognize places they'd never visited, all because their ancestors' memories lived within them like ghosts. He flipped frantically through more pages. The resonant bloodline was eliminated during the Great Purge, as their power threatened the new vampire order. However, some resonants escaped by taking human form and breeding with mortal populations, diluting their blood over generations. There, a prophecy, written in faded ink on parchment so old it nearly crumbled at his touch. When the crown of Octavian's line sits upon the throne, a mortal vessel shall emerge bearing the voice of the firstborn. She will arrive not as conqueror, but as teacher, and through her, the ancient wisdom shall return. Embrace her, and peace shall reign. Destroy her, and history shall repeat its bloodiest chapter. Octavian sat back heavily, his mind reeling. Mira wasn't just speaking the ancient tongue. She was the prophecy. 3 levels above, in a small servant's quarters, Mira couldn't sleep. She lay on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had happened. The king's reaction terrified her. She'd seen fear in his ancient eyes, fear of her, and that seemed impossible. She was nobody, nothing, just a girl who heard pretty words in her sleep. Her eyes drifted closed despite her anxiety, and the moment they did, the dream began. Not her dream. She knew that instantly. It never felt like her dream. She stood in a temple carved from white stone that seemed to glow from within. Torches lined the walls, burning with silver flames. And there, at the center of the vast chamber, stood a woman. She was tall, regal, with midnight hair that fell to her waist. Her eyes, when she turned them toward Mira, burned gold instead of crimson. A firstborn vampire. Mira knew it somehow, the way you know things in dreams. The woman knelt beside a stone altar where a child lay sleeping, a girl no older than 3, human by the look of her. The vampire woman placed her hand on the child's forehead and began to chant. Veskaranim doltvenit saimora gelsivan arator. The same words, the exact same words Mira had been teaching Celine. The woman's voice echoed through the temple, and with each syllable, light poured from her hand into the child's body. Not harmful light, it looked like liquid starlight, warm and gentle. The woman whispered, and this time Mira understood every word as if they were her own tongue. Keep her safe. Keep the knowledge safe. One day, when the time is right, your blood will remember. Your voice will speak what your mind has forgotten. And you will protect the child of his line, just as I protect you now. The vampire woman looked up suddenly, directly at Mira. Their eyes met across 8 centuries of death and time. Granddaughter of my granddaughter of my granddaughter, the woman said, her voice both fierce and loving. Do not fear what you carry. It was given in love, preserved in sacrifice, and will bloom in you when she needs it most. Trust the king. He is bound to you by threads older than his crown. The temple dissolved. Mira woke gasping, tears streaming down her face. She sat up in the darkness, her heart pounding, and whispered the words that suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. I'm not just teaching her the language. I'm supposed to protect her. But protect her from what? And why did the king's face, stern and ancient in the garden, suddenly seem less terrifying and more familiar? As if she'd known him before. As if her blood remembered him, even though her mind did not. The council convened at midday in the great hall, beneath chandeliers that dripped with crystals older than most human civilizations. Octavian hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire night in the archives, and now sat at the head of the obsidian table with shadows under his eyes that even vampire healing couldn't erase. Around him sat the 7 council members, ancient vampires who'd advised his family for generations. Lord Vashon, Lady Morvayn, the twins Kellier and Kess, High Advisor Draven, who'd served since Octavian's grandfather's reign. They were discussing trade routes with the southern territories when Octavian interrupted. "I need information about the resonance." The entire table went silent. Lady Morvayn, who'd been mid-sentence about grain shipments, slowly closed her mouth. Lord Vashon's wineglass paused halfway to his lips. High Advisor Draven spoke first, his voice carefully neutral. "The resonance, Your Majesty? That's rather ancient history. May I ask what prompts this?" "Curiosity." "Answer the question, Draven." The old vampire's eyes narrowed slightly. They were a sub-bloodline of the firstborn. Dangerous. Unpredictable. They claimed to carry ancestral memories, which made them believe they had the right to rule over all vampires. Your great-grandfather eliminated them for the good of the realm. Eliminated? Octavian leaned forward. Or did some escape? The question hung in the air like poison. Kellier, the younger of the twins, laughed nervously. Escape? Your Majesty, the purge was 8 centuries ago. Even if anyone escaped, they'd be long dead by now. Unless, Octavian said slowly, they bred with humans. Diluted the bloodline. Passed the gift down through mortal generations. Lady Morvayn's face had gone very pale. That's just legend, surely. Folk tales to frighten children. Is it? Octavian pulled a folded parchment from his coat, the prophecy he'd copied in the archives. Because I found something interesting last night. A prophecy about a mortal vessel emerging during my reign, bearing the voice of the firstborn. Draven stood abruptly. Where did you find that? The Forbidden Archives. Where you all assured me there was nothing but dusty genealogies. The council members exchanged glances. Something unspoken passed between them. Your Majesty, Draven said carefully, if you found evidence of a surviving resonant bloodline, this is a matter of immediate security. We must. Must what? Octavian's voice sharpened. Must hunt them down? Repeat the purge? Spill more innocent blood. Innocent. Lord Vashon finally spoke, his ancient voice rough as gravel. The resonance nearly destroyed our entire civilization. They believed their ancestral memories gave them authority over the crown itself. They started a civil war that lasted 30 years and killed thousands. Your great-grandfather didn't eliminate them out of cruelty, boy. He did it out of necessity. I'm not a boy, Vashon. And I'll thank you to remember who wears the crown. Vashon had the grace to bow his head, but his jaw remained tight. Kess, the quieter twin, spoke up softly. Your Majesty, have you found one? A resonant? Octavian didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was enough. Gods below, Morvayn whispered. You have. Who is it? Where are they? That's not your concern. Not our. Draven moved around the table. Your Majesty, with all due respect, if there's a resonant in this castle, it's absolutely our concern. They could be influencing you right now. Their power is subtle, insidious. She's not influencing anyone. She doesn't even know what she is. She? Vashon stood now too. A female resonant? Even more dangerous. The females carried the gift strongest. They could compel armies with a single speech, rewrite history with their words. Enough. Octavian's fist hit the table, cracking the obsidian. I didn't call this meeting for your paranoid fantasies. I called it for information, which you've provided. This council is dismissed. Your Majesty, please. Draven reached out. I said dismissed. The council members filed out slowly, shooting worried glances at each other. All except Draven, who lingered by the door. Octavian, he said quietly, dropping the formal title they'd used since childhood. Whatever you think you're protecting, it will destroy you. The resonants always do. It's in their nature. Perhaps, Octavian said coldly. Or perhaps my great-grandfather was simply afraid of power he couldn't control. Now get out. Draven left. But Octavian saw him through the window 10 minutes later, walking quickly across the courtyard toward the east wing. Toward the servants' quarters.
Toward Mira.
Octavian was moving before he could think, his body a blur as he raced down corridors, leaped down staircases, his heart pounding with an urgency he hadn't felt in decades. He reached Myra's door just as Draven turned the corner behind him. Their eyes met. And Octavian knew with absolute certainty his most trusted advisor had just become his greatest enemy. "Stay away from her," Octavian said quietly. Draven smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "I'm afraid it's too late for that, old friend. The council has already voted. The girl dies tonight." Octavian didn't knock. He burst through Myra's door to find her packing a small cloth bag with trembling hands. She spun around, eyes wide. "Your Majesty, I heard shouting and I thought, we're leaving." Now he grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with undeniable urgency. "Is this all you have?" Yes, but..." "Good.
Come."
He pulled her into the corridor just as the sound of boots echoed from the eastern stairwell.
Guards.
Draven had wasted no time. Octavian changed direction, dragging Mira toward the servants' passage, a narrow corridor used for bringing meals without disturbing the nobility. She stumbled behind him, confused and terrified. "Your Majesty, what's happening? Where are we?" "My daughter's room. Quickly." They burst into Celine's chambers to find the princess playing with dolls on her carpet. She looked up, delighted.
"Papa."
"And Mira, are we having a tea party?" "Better." Octavian forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're going on an adventure. But you must be very quiet, little star."
"Can you do that?"
Celine nodded eagerly, already reaching for her favorite cloak. Within minutes, they slipped out through a hidden passage Octavian's grandfather had built for emergencies exactly like this. It led down through the castle's foundation and emerged in the forest half a mile from the walls. By the time Draven's guards kicked in Myra's empty room, they were already gone. 2 days of hard travel brought them to a place Octavian barely remembered, Millbrook, a human border village nestled between mountain peaks. It was the kind of place vampires forgot existed, too small for trade, too remote for politics.
Perfect.
They arrived at dusk, cloaked and hooded. Octavian had procured human clothing from a trader on the road, simple wool and cotton that made them look like a traveling merchant family. "Stay close," he murmured as they entered the village square. "We're looking for lodging. Mira, you do the talking. You're still human enough to pass without question." Mira nodded, clutching Celine's hand. The village was modest but clean. Stone cottages with thatched roofs. A well at the center. Children playing in the fading light. It smelled of bread and horse and the honest sweat of human labor. An old woman directed them to a widow who rented rooms, and within an hour they were settled in a small cottage at the village edge. Celine explored every corner with delight. Thrilled by the adventure, Mira collapsed onto a wooden chair, finally allowing herself to breathe. "Your Majesty," she whispered. "What happened? Why did we run?" Octavian stood by the window, watching the darkening street. "The council has decided you're a threat. They want you dead." Myra's face drained of color. "But I haven't done anything. You exist. That's enough for them." He turned to face her. "Mira, you need to understand what you are. You're not just speaking an old language. You're carrying the memories of an entire bloodline, the Resonants. They were the most powerful vampires who ever lived, and my ancestors slaughtered them out of fear. But I'm human. You have their blood, diluted through centuries, but still there. Still awake." He moved closer. "Those dreams you have? Those aren't dreams. They're memories. Your ancestors' memories, passed down through your blood." Myra's hands shook. "The woman in the temple. She called me granddaughter of her granddaughter. She was protecting you, hiding the gift in mortal bloodlines where no one would think to look." Octavian's expression softened. "You were teaching Celine that language because your blood knew she needed it. The prophecy said you'd come to teach, to protect. Your instincts were guiding you toward your purpose. Purpose. Mira laughed, high and slightly hysterical. I'm a maid. I don't have a purpose beyond scrubbing floors and… Mira, he caught her hands, steadying them. You are so much more than you know. Before she could respond, Celine's voice called from the bedroom. Mira, come see. There's a bird's nest in the window. Mira pulled away, grateful for the distraction. That night, after Celine fell asleep, Mira stood in the small kitchen and watched the stars through the window. The dreams came stronger now, clearer. The temple woman, the chanting, and new memories, a great library. Vampires with golden eyes reading from floating books. A ceremony where children were blessed with ancestral gifts. She whispered the words without thinking. Veshkaranim, Tolveneth Esamora. And something inside her answered. A warmth spreading through her chest. A sense of recognition, as if a sleeping part of her soul had finally opened its eyes. In the bedroom doorway, Octavian watched her silently. The prophecy was unfolding exactly as written. And he realized with startling clarity, he wasn't just protecting her from the council. He was protecting her for something yet to come. Something that would change everything. They had 3 peaceful days in Millbrook. 3 days where Celine played with village children, delighted by their simple games. 3 days where Mira learned to bake bread in the cottage's small oven, her face flushed with flour and something almost like happiness. 3 days where Octavian almost believed they could stay hidden forever. On the 4th night, everything shattered. Mira had gone to gather herbs from the forest edge. The widow had mentioned a patch of wild thyme nearby, and Mira wanted to make a proper stew. Celine stayed behind, already asleep after a day of running through fields. Octavian sat by the hearth, reading by firelight, when he felt it. A disturbance in the air, the particular cold that came with vampire presence. He was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. 3 figures in dark cloaks stood at the forest edge, watching the cottage. Council assassins. Octavian's blood turned to ice. Not for himself, he could fight 3 assassins easily. But Mira was out there. Alone. Vulnerable. He moved like shadow, slipping out the back door and into the darkness. Mira hummed softly as she knelt among the herbs, her basket half full of thyme and wild rosemary. The forest was peaceful, silvered by moonlight. For the first time in days, her mind felt quiet.
No dreams. No strange memories.
Just the simple task of gathering herbs like her mother had taught her. Then a twig snapped behind her. She turned. 2 vampires stood between her and the village. Their eyes glowed crimson in the darkness, fangs already extended. A third dropped from a tree branch, landing with inhuman grace to cut off her escape. The resonant, the tallest one said, his voice like gravel. Draven sends his regards. Myra's basket fell from nerveless fingers. Please, I don't want trouble. I'll leave. I'll never come back. Too late for that, girl, the vampire lunged. Mira screamed and stumbled backward, tripping over a root. She hit the ground hard, throwing up her hands instinctively. And words poured from her mouth. Not words she chose. Words that chose her. The sound that came from her throat wasn't entirely human. It resonated with layers, echoes, as if 100 voices spoke through her at once. The air exploded. An invisible shockwave blasted outward from Myra's body, slamming into all 3 assassins with the force of a battering ram. They flew backward, crashing into trees with sounds of splintering wood and bone. Mira stared at her hands, glowing faintly with golden light that faded even as she watched. What did I? The tallest assassin rose with a snarl, blood dripping from his mouth. Awake or not, you die tonight. Octavian materialized behind him and tore his head clean off. The body crumbled to ash before it hit the ground. The remaining 2 assassins tried to flee, but Octavian was faster, older, and absolutely furious. Within seconds, Only ash remained scattered across the forest floor. Then he turned to Mira. She sat frozen on the ground, staring at her hands, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to. I don't know how I... You saved yourself. Octavian knelt beside her, his expression fierce and proud. Your blood remembered how to fight, how to protect. I hurt them. I could have killed them. They came to murder you, Mira. You did nothing wrong. He pulled her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. But we can't stay here now. They'll send more. Mira nodded numbly, but as she took a step, her knees buckled. The power that had surged through her had burned something out. She felt hollow, exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. Octavian caught her before she fell. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry. I just need a moment. Don't apologize. His voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. What you just did would drain an experienced resonant for days. The fact that you're still conscious is extraordinary. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest as he strode back toward the cottage. She was too weak to protest, her head falling against a shoulder. The words, she murmured. I understood them. When I spoke, I knew what they meant. Shield of ancestors, that's what I said. How did I know? Because your blood remembers what your mind doesn't. Octavian glanced down at her, and something in his expression shifted. Something almost tender. You're not just carrying their memories, Mira. You're becoming what you were always meant to be. What's that? A guardian. A protector. He paused at the cottage door. The last living resonant. Myra's eyes drifted closed, consciousness slipping away. But before the darkness took her, she whispered. The temple woman. She said I'd protect his daughter. She meant Celine, didn't she? Yes, Octavian said quietly. Then I will. Whatever it takes. She went limp in his arms, finally surrendering to exhaustion. Octavian carried her inside and laid her gently on the bed beside his sleeping daughter. Two souls under his protection now. And the council wouldn't stop until both were dead. Which meant they couldn't hide anymore. It was time to face this head-on. They left Millbrook before dawn, with only what they could carry. Octavian woke them both, while stars still glittered overhead. Mira moved stiffly, her body aching from the power she'd channeled. Celine rubbed her eyes sleepily, but didn't complain when her father bundled her into her cloak. Where are we going, Papa? She whispered as they slipped into the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere the council will never think to look. They travel north, into mountains so ancient they'd been old when Octavian was born. The paths grew narrow and treacherous. Mira carried Celine when the child tired, and Octavian scouted ahead, alert for any sign of pursuit. On the second day, as they climbed a ridge shrouded in mist, Mira stopped abruptly. I know this place. Octavian turned back. That's impossible. These mountains have been uninhabited for 843 years. Myra's eyes had gone distant. When the purge came, the survivors fled here, to the citadel of First Light. They thought the sacred ground would protect them. She wasn't speaking in her own voice anymore. The cadence had changed, become older, more formal. It didn't, she continued softly. The soldiers came anyway, burned everything, killed everyone. But before they died, the elders sealed the temple's heart, hoping someday. She blinked, and her normal voice returned. I'm doing it again, aren't I? The memories. Octavian studied her with new intensity. Can you find it? The citadel? Mira closed her eyes, tilting her head as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she pointed northeast, toward a peak wreathed in clouds. There. The ruins emerged from the mist like a ghost of something magnificent. Massive stone pillars still stood, carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the corner of your eye. Broken archways framed empty sky. The temple itself had been built into the mountain, and though time and violence had scarred it, the bones of its grandeur remained. Celine gasped. It's beautiful. It was, Mira whispered, tears suddenly streaming down her face, though she didn't know why. It was the most beautiful place in the world. Octavian approached cautiously, but as they crossed the threshold, he felt something change. The air grew warmer. The oppressive weight of the ruins lifted, replaced by something almost welcoming. The wards are still active, he said with wonder. After all this time, the protection magic still recognizes resonant blood. Mira moved as if in a trance, her feet carrying her through the rubble toward the temple's heart. Octavian followed with Celine, watching as Mira navigated perfectly through corridors she'd never seen, turning at intersections without hesitation. She led them to a vast chamber deep within the mountain. The walls were covered in murals. Despite centuries of abandonment, the paintings glowed with faint luminescence, preserved by the same magic that protected the temple. They showed the history of the resonance, their creation, their golden age, their gifts to vampire civilization. And there, on the far wall, a prophecy painted in gold and silver. In the reign of the Storm King's heir, when shadows lengthen and fear returns, a daughter of diluted blood shall rise. She will bear the voice of the ancestors, speak the tongue of the firstborn, and teach the child who bridges two worlds. Embrace her as guardian, and the age of fear shall end. Reject her, and darkness shall consume all. Below it, a mural showed a vampire king with crimson eyes standing beside a human woman with golden light emanating from her hands. Between them, a child with one crimson eye and one gold. Celine tugged Myra's sleeve. That looks like Papa. And you.
And
Me. Mira stared at the painting, her heart hammering. Storm King's heir. Octavian. Your father was called the Storm King, wasn't he? My grandfather, Octavian said quietly. My father died before taking the throne. The prophecy skipped a generation. He looked at the mural, then at Mira. You were never meant to serve my household by accident. Your ancestors guided you there. To her. Mira knelt before Celine, taking the child's small hands. You're part of this too, aren't you? The bridge between two worlds. I don't understand, Celine said. But Octavian did. He saw it clearly now. His daughter, born of vampire nobility, learning the ancient tongue from a resonant. Being prepared for something. A role that required her to speak both languages, understand both peoples. A true bridge between vampire and the ancient bloodlines they'd tried to erase.
Papa.
Celine looked frightened by his expression. What does it mean? Before he could answer, whispers filled the chamber. Not threatening, welcoming. Voices in the ancient tongue, speaking from the walls themselves, from the stones saturated with centuries of resonant power. Welcome home, daughter of our daughters, they murmured. Welcome, Storm King. Welcome, little bridge. The circle begins again. Myra's hands began to glow with golden light, responding to the temple's recognition. And in that moment, standing in the ruins of a civilization destroyed by fear, Octavian made his choice. We're not running anymore, he said firmly. We go back. We face the council. And we end this cycle, not with more death, but with truth. Mira looked up at him, her eyes blazing gold. They'll try to kill us. Let them try. Octavian's smile was sharp as a blade. They've never faced an awakened resonant before. And they've certainly never faced a king willing to burn his own council to ash. 3 days later, Octavian walked through the castle gates with Mira and Celine at his side.
No disguises. No hiding.
The guards at the entrance stumbled backward in shock. Word spread like wildfire through the corridors. The king had returned, and he'd brought the resonant with him. By the time they reached the throne hall, the entire council was assembled, along with a dozen armed guards positioned at every exit. High Advisor Draven stood at the center, his expression carefully neutral. Your Majesty,
We've been
concerned about your absence. I'm sure you were. Octavian strode to his throne, Celine's hand in his, Mira walking just behind them. Concern enough to send assassins after an innocent woman? The council members exchanged glances. Lady Morvain spoke up, her voice trembling. Your Majesty, we acted to protect the realm. The resonants are not your enemy. Octavian sat, and the simple act carried weight. Authority. But I am, if you continue down this path. Lord Vashon stepped forward, his ancient face hard. You defend her out of sentiment, boy. You don't remember the resonant wars like some of us do. I watched them tear apart families with their compulsions, rewrite loyalty with their voices. She's done none of that, Octavian interrupted coldly. She's been in this castle for 2 years. If she'd wanted to control minds, don't you think she'd have started by now? Draven pulled a rolled parchment from his robes. Actually, Your Majesty, we have evidence suggesting otherwise. Records of unusual behavior among the staff. Guards reporting missing time. Servants acting against their nature. Forged, Octavian didn't even look at the document. I know your handwriting, old friend. You were always skilled at falsifying records. Draven's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing cold fury beneath. The truth is simpler, Octavian continued. You're afraid. All of you. Afraid that if the resonants return, you'll lose the power you've hoarded for centuries. Afraid that someone might question how my great-grandfather really came to power by slaughtering the rightful ruling bloodline and claiming their throne. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. That's treason, Kellier shouted. Your Majesty, you can't possibly believe. I've read the sealed archives. Every word. Octavian's voice cut through the noise. The resonants didn't start the war. We did. We feared their power, their wisdom, their ability to remember truth when we wanted to bury it. So we killed them and called it justice. Mira stood frozen, processing this revelation. The temple woman's memories suddenly made terrible sense. The surprise attack, the betrayal, the desperate attempt to save the children by hiding them among humans. Draven drew a blade. Then you've become compromised. The council has no choice but to remove you for the good of. Every guard in the room drew their weapons. But they weren't pointing them at Octavian. They were pointing them at the council. Draven stared in shock. What is this? Loyalty, said the captain of the guard, a weathered vampire named Torin. You sent us to kill a girl who'd done nothing wrong. Some of us still remember what honor means. This is madness. Lady Morvayn backed toward the wall. She's controlling all of you. Can't you see? This is exactly what the resonants do. I'm controlling no one. Myra's voice rang clear through the hall. She stepped forward, and as she did, golden light began to emanate from her skin. Not threatening, it felt warm, ancient, like sunlight through stained glass. I don't need to control anyone, she continued, her voice layering with those ancestral echoes. Because truth doesn't require compulsion. She raised her hands and began to speak in the ancient tongue. Veshkaranim, tolvenit samora, kelshivan arator, nestalim vokesh. The throne room responded. Runes carved into the stone floor, so old they'd been worn smooth and forgotten, suddenly blazed to life with golden light. They spread across the floor in intricate patterns, up the walls, across the vaulted ceiling. The castle itself was covered in resonant magic, built on their sacred ground, constructed with their blessings. And it recognized Myra's blood. The light concentrated around the throne, revealing words etched in the stone that no one had seen in 8 centuries. This seat belongs to those who remember. This crown serves those who speak truth. This realm protects all who bear the firstborn light. Lord Vashon fell to his knees, his face ash-white. The throne. It was theirs. It was always theirs. Not theirs, Octavian said quietly. Ours. Vampire and resonant together, as it was meant to be before fear corrupted everything. One by one, the guards knelt. Then the servants who'd gathered at the doors. Then Captain Torin. The council stood alone, surrounded by glowing runes and kneeling subjects. Draven's blade clattered to the floor. You've lost, old friend, Octavian said without triumph. Not to compulsion. Not to force. To truth. Slowly, tears streaming down his ancient face, High Advisor Draven knelt. The others followed, and the golden light filling the throne room felt like dawn after an 800-year night. Dawn broke over the citadel in shades of gold and rose that seemed impossibly bright after so many dark years. Octavian stood on the balcony of his private chambers, watching the sun paint the sky. He could tolerate it now, just barely, for a few precious moments before retreating inside. Behind him, through the open doors, he heard Myra's voice.
Veshkaranim. Good, Celine.
Now, the next phrase.
Tolvenit Samora.
He turned to watch them. They sat cross-legged on cushions by the window, Celine repeating the words carefully while Mira guided her with patient corrections. The princess's eyes, one crimson like her father's, one showing flecks of gold that hadn't been there before the temple, shone with concentration. The bridge between worlds, just as the prophecy foretold. Your Majesty? Octavian turned to find Captain Torin at the doorway. The new council is assembled. Already. Octavian smiled slightly. Draven would have made them wait an hour just to establish importance. Draven is gone, sire. Along with Vashon and Lady Morvain. They left the citadel at dawn, as you permitted. Octavian had given the old council a choice, adapt or leave. 3 had chosen exile. The others, younger vampires more willing to embrace change, remained, joined by new voices Octavian had personally selected, including one very surprised former maid. Tell them I'll be there shortly. Torin hesitated. Sire, there's something else. Delegations have been arriving since yesterday. Word has spread about everything. They want to see her. The resonant. Let them wait. Octavian's tone softened the command. She's exactly where she needs to be. After Torin left, Octavian returned to watching the lesson. Celine had progressed to a more complex phrase, one that made the air shimmer slightly when spoken correctly. Mira caught his eye and smiled, the first truly peaceful smile he'd seen from her. She's a natural, Mira said. Her vampire blood makes the ancient tongue resonate differently, stronger. And your resonant blood gives you the wisdom to teach her. Octavian moved closer. The prophecy knew what it was doing, putting you both together. Celine looked up. Papa, Mira says I'll be able to speak to both vampires and resonants when I'm grown. Is that true? If you study hard enough, he knelt beside his daughter. You'll be able to bring together what fear tore apart. Like you did. Celine asked with the blunt honesty of children. Octavian glanced at Mira, who blushed slightly. Not quite like me. Better. A servant appeared with breakfast, warm bread and honey for Celine, fresh fruit for Mira, and a crystal glass of deep red for Octavian. They ate together on the balcony, an odd little family forged by prophecy and circumstance. The council meeting, Mira said eventually, setting down her cup. I'm still not sure about this, Your Majesty. I'm not a politician. I don't know how to. You know how to speak truth. That's enough. Octavian stood, offering his hand to help her up. Besides, you're not joining the council as a politician. You're joining as guardian of firstborn knowledge. Your role is to teach, to preserve, to ensure we never forget again. And to protect Celine, Mira added softly. That too, he squeezed her hand briefly before releasing it. Though something tells me she'll be protecting you just as often soon enough. Celine beamed at that, puffing up with pride. The new council meeting was nothing like the old ones. Where before there had been rigid formality and barely concealed hostility, now there was genuine discussion. Arguments, yes. Vampires didn't suddenly become agreeable overnight, but honest ones, without the poisonous undercurrent of fear. Mira sat at Octavian's right hand, in the seat that had remained empty for 8 centuries. The resonant seat. She listened more than she spoke, but when she did speak, the room quieted. Not from compulsion, from respect. The ancient tongue isn't a weapon, she explained to a young council member who'd asked. It's a bridge to understanding. Each word carries layers of meaning that modern languages have lost. When resonants speak it, we're not just communicating, we're sharing entire contexts, histories, emotions. Could you teach it to others? Kellier asked, genuinely curious now. Not just the princess. Mira considered. Perhaps. If they're willing to learn, to truly listen. The language only works when spoken with understanding, not just memorization. Then we should establish a school, Octavian said. Here in the citadel, where young vampires can learn the true history, not the sanitized version we've been teaching for centuries. The council murmured agreement. As the meeting continued, Octavian felt something shift in his chest. Hope, perhaps. Something he'd almost forgotten after 3 centuries of maintaining a throne built on lies. Later, as evening fell, he found Mira back on the balcony with Celine. The princess had fallen asleep against Myra's shoulder, exhausted from her lessons. Mira hummed softly, one of the old songs, the ones her mother had sung. The ancient tongue woven into a lullaby that spoke of peace, of unity, of different bloods flowing together to create something stronger. She's ready, you know, Octavian said quietly, leaning against the doorframe. For what? To change the world. He looked at his sleeping daughter, then at Mira. You both are. Mira smiled, her eyes glowing faintly gold in the dying light. We're just teaching, Your Majesty. Speaking truth. Nothing world-changing about that, isn't there? He moved to stand beside them, looking out over his realm. Truth toppled my council in a day. Imagine what it could do given years. Below them, the citadel was lighting its evening lamps. Soon, darkness would fall, but it wouldn't feel threatening anymore. Because dawn always came after. And now, for the first time in 800 years, they weren't afraid of what the light might reveal. Mira began to sing again, her voice carrying the ancient tongue into the twilight. Celine stirred, murmuring the words in her sleep. And Octavian closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. The language of his ancestors' victims, now become a song of healing. The age of fear had ended. The age of truth had begun.